Hey guys, welcome back to the 3-Hour News Show, and this is the stories on See the Stories. Now, before we jump to our discussion, I want to ask you, Kai, as a mother and a wife, what comes to your mind when you hear stories about divorce? Anything, I'm sure.
Loss.
Lost, right. I mean, I can relate a little, right? Because, again, there's a lot of, you can't really tell sometimes, or you don't really realize, but people around you, you go and you have that. Now, divorce is a very difficult subject for any married couple, and it has been a point of contention for centuries all over the world.
Yeah, so before that, let's just take a look at the story first.
According to the data from the United Nations and other sources, Maldives had the highest divorce rate in the world in 2020. The country recorded 2,984 divorces in a population of 540,544, resulting in a divorce rate of 5.52 per 1,000 people. The Republic of Kazakhstan endured the second highest divorce rate in the world in 2020, with 4.6 divorces for every 1,000 people.
Meanwhile, in Indonesia, National Population and Family Planning Board, or BKKB, head Hasto Wardoyo said that 500,000 divorce cases are recorded in the country every year. The board estimates that West Java leads the number of divorces in Indonesia.
Now, divorce is a stressful event for many. It can affect our mental health. And so now, how can we deal with the difficulties of a broken marriage? Now, to delve more into the subject, we have clinical psychologist Mutiara Maharini in the studio. Thank you, Mutiara, for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Like, you're such a regular here in the studio now. Yeah.
Very, very.
So, Mahari, right, I think it comes down to when you have to take a look at the psychological effects, right? What emotions does it come down to when someone is going through a divorce, and how can that manifest as a trauma?
Okay. So first of all, I want to thank you guys for talking about this topic, because even though maybe not any of us have maybe experienced it, but we do know people around us who have experienced it, and we do know that in more developed countries, this is a big issue. We don't know what's going to happen in Indonesia, but we do want to be aware of how, the divorce affects people around us, especially their mental health. So back to the question about how, what kind of emotions we feel. There are a lot of emotions that you can feel after divorce, especially because people get divorced for different reasons, right?
Yeah.
But number one, the quite intense emotion is anger. A lot of people feel angry after getting divorced because there is a betrayal or something that happened that they didn't expect when they married that person. And then of course there's sadness. There's a feeling of failure. And if you are religious, you might also be feeling that you kind of broken your promise to God.
Okay.
And then there's anxiety, because I'm sure nobody gets married planning to get divorced, right? So you don't really know what's going to happen after the divorce. You kind of feel lost, like you said. You don't know what's going to happen. And then there's also a feeling of guilt, shame, questioning yourself, were there actually things that you could have done to save the marriage? And of course, feeling guilty to your children if you have children. And there's also grief. And it's a different kind of grief to when somebody you love dies, because this person physically is still here, but psychologically, emotionally, they're not there anymore. And that kind of hurts in a different way, you know what I mean? And last but not least is loneliness. Because even though maybe you didn't have a good or healthy relationship, but that person was there for a long time, and it may take some time to get used to feeling alone again. Even though maybe you could have been feeling lonely from when you were married, but the divorce kind of hits differently when you're already completely separated physically as well.
It's very complicated to really understand. There's sadness, there's anger, there's anxiety, there's...
It's a melting pot.
Exactly, it's everything in between. You really have to understand. Now, how do we then differentiate between the normal post-divorce sadness and more serious trauma-related symptoms?
Yes, so the key is actually the duration and the intensity. So it's completely normal for you to be feeling a wide range of emotions and maybe quite intense as well. But if you're feeling intense emotions like straight for 2 weeks, that's already a sign usually that maybe you should get, checked up or go to therapy. And if in the next 6 months you feel like there isn't really a lot of adjustment that you felt mentally, that's also a sign that, okay, maybe, you do need help and there are some issues adjusting, after the divorce. And if you're talking about the trauma-related symptoms, if you have a lot of nightmares, flashbacks, you become very hyper-vigilant, or maybe you can even sometimes be like having panic attacks, things like that, that can be signs that, you might have trauma. Don't self-diagnose yourself, but that is definitely signs that you should get checked up if you can.
So you've mentioned, a whole pot of emotions.
Yeah.
So you mentioned also that it's very common for somebody to feel super overwhelmed because that's a lot of emotion.
Yes.
Right.
That
Just
she
talking
mentioned.
about it is overwhelming, right?
So that's a lot of emotion one person feels at one time. And, one of the things that usually, is a signal that you might need help or signal that you're not feeling okay is when you feel these triggers, right? Psychological triggers. Something, either it triggers like, I don't know, heavy sweats or something makes you hear or see something that suddenly triggers hyperventilation or something like that. How does one in this process of going through or processing a divorce, manage these psychological triggers that bring up painful memories? Because you always get these flashbacks, right?
Yes,
Just like grieving, any kind of grieving and loss.
Yeah. So maybe just to explain a bit, triggers are like people, places, and situations that bring back those painful memories, right?
Yeah.
The number one thing you actually need to do is to identify the triggers. Because at first, maybe you feel like, oh my God, why am I suddenly feeling this, suddenly feeling that? And you're just confused. But once you start identifying, okay, passing by my old house makes me feel sad. Okay, meeting my mother-in-law makes me feel angry. Okay, seeing my children make me feel guilty. Things like that actually kind of help structure the chaotic things that are happening in your mind. So number one, identify the triggers. And identifying them will actually help you be able to kind of develop the coping skills that you need. Because there are two kind of coping skills. There's the emotion-focused one, the one where you kind of try to regulate your emotions by relaxing, taking a deep breath, sometimes just writing in your phone what you're feeling, things like that. But there's also the problem-focused one, which is basically the more technical one. So once you've identified your triggers and you kind of understand your mental capacity, you can kind of plan your day, plan your month. Okay, you know what? I don't think I'm capable of seeing my mother-in-law anytime soon. But then you kind of have to be able, okay, but I can't like avoid her for a year, right? So that's the kind of way you can solve the problem and have that coping skills.
So first identify the emotion and then you find a solution for that,
Yes.
right? So I love this because this is basically the most basic coping mechanism is always identifying the emotion because I remember you came to the studio once and she said putting a name to an emotion actually takes away the power of the emotion.
Yep.
So it's like the Inside Out movie. We were just talking about it. It's out now, right?
Yeah, it's out on the second one. Now, specifically talking about the, coping with emotions. Now, what about coping with feelings of loneliness and abandonments? Because of course, divorcee person must feel that very heavily.
Yes. Here's the thing about feeling loneliness. It's actually in general, not only after divorce. It kind of sometimes tricks your brain, and when you're feeling lonely, it kind of tricks you into saying that nobody loves you. Don't call anyone. They don't care about you. When actually that's so counterintuitive to what you actually need. What you actually need is to go out there, to call the people you love, to kind of reconnect with your old friends. That's what you actually need. Right. So when you're feeling lonely, just avoid, self-isolating yourself. Go out there, reconnect, and that's the most important thing because after a divorce, your life is already really hard. You do need that extra support. You do need to outsource some love, you know what I mean?
Right.
So that is definitely what I recommend doing.
Certainly is really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. You really want to be, you want to go back into the world, right? I mean, but then maybe this is a follow-up question. How long do you know, I mean, when do you know that you're actually, I think I'm ready, right? To go out and then, you know.
Is this like in a
go
dating
back.
context?
Not really in a dating context, but like you said, go reconnect. And then because sometimes you feel like, you feel pity for yourself, you feel bad, you feel, but how do you say to yourself, that's it, I can't do this any longer, I gotta, is there any trigger before you actually get to that point?
To be honest, even when you don't have any problems, I do think you should have a regular support system and meet people regularly. So even if now, maybe you're still in the divorce process, I would say, you know, you have to reconnect with your old friends from now. You have to reconnect with the people you love because you do need that extra support. Just the process of getting divorced is already very, very difficult. So don't wait until, you know, after the divorce. You know, start soon, start now.
Well, if I summarize that, it means that connection is the antidote to, you know, that lack of self-trust. Because I know in that situation, you must not trust yourself so much. And according to what you said, is the danger is when you isolate yourself, right? Is that you actually dig a deeper hole to yourself because there's no one pulling you out and you don't have the capability of climbing out of that hole. So that's really interesting. So always keep a support system. Okay, noted. So there's a lot of points that we've taken so far. So if you know, if you had a patient coming in, right, who's currently going through or processing a divorce, what types of therapy would you suggest, or what types of activities perhaps would you suggest to, you know, to help this person move forward?
Well, the number one gold standard for facing trauma is actually CBT, cognitive behavior therapy. Especially after a divorce, you might be having a lot of negative beliefs about yourself and also about others, about the world in general, maybe. So that's how CBT will help you kind of identify those negative beliefs and then reframe them so that you can function better and kind of see the world more objectively. That's one thing. And then the second thing is EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So if you have a lot of flashbacks, you have a lot of traumatic memories that keep coming back to you, this therapy will help you actually face those memories, but in a way that kind of lessens the intensity. So it doesn't become so, it doesn't bother you that much anymore. And to be honest, if the relationship is still quite good, couple counseling after the divorce is actually a good thing to think about, because especially if you're going to do co-parenting, right? You kind of need someone who's objective to help guide you through that process, because it is very, very confusing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you didn't have children, that wouldn't be too
That's
because you get to just walk away separately and start new. But if there's children involved, that's already an added factor.
Exactly. Now, how then, going forward, do we create a new routine or structure to make sure that, again, we get out of this bad place or bad feeling, that we are just ready to face the world again?
Yeah. I think when we're feeling like very chaotic, like our mind is so messy, we kind of immediately want to run to find something structured because it does give us a sense of safety, right?
Yeah.
But I would say be careful with this because sometimes we kind of overcompensate there, and then we're like, okay, I have a plan from A to Z, and then we're very ambitious, and then we make it so detailed, and then it's basically like setting us up for our own failure because we're not in a state of, you know, we're not like very productive. We're actually in a very bad state. And what we do need is actually small, realistic goals that will help us guide us, you know, throughout this process that we don't even know what we're going to experience. So that's the number one thing. Be careful, because that's what I see a lot of the times. We immediately want to jump to a nice detailed routine that will save us from any kind of chaotic things, but then we end up kind of just being completely messed up.
Or running away.
Running away.
Altogether, right?
So do set some small, realistic goals and stick with them. Definitely, number one is focus on your basic needs, healthy habits, get enough sleep, eat enough. That's I would say just focus on that first, you know, don't think about the ambitions and others.
Yeah, put yourself back together in a good sleeping habit, good eating habit and everything, and just exercising and all that. Okay, sounds really good. Sounds very healthy.
I wanted to ask something about that, because when you're going through a processing, this is basically like you dealing with change in your life, right? This is basically like, okay, I'm moving, I want to move on towards like a new, milestone.
Like a new era, I guess.
A new era of your life, right? So, small goals, but my question is, right, I think this is a question for everyone. I mean, as you mentioned before, nobody wants to get married, nobody who's getting married plans for divorce.
Yep.
Right.
But how do you make yourself more resilient in terms of being able to process these kind of changes better in your life? Because it's really tough if it suddenly hits you in the face, but because usually the repercussions could be even greater. But I'm not saying it's you preparing for a divorce, but is there a way for you to be just mentally more resilient, to be able to face whatever comes in life? And what kind of tips would you give people who are looking for this mental resilience?
Yeah. I think resilience it's such a sexy word now, right? Everybody's looking for it, but we don't really know what are the practical ways to get there. I think it's actually knowing yourself and your limits and challenging yourself every day. You can't just challenge yourself every day but not know your limits. That will not end up any good.
Yeah.
But also, if you know your limits and you stay there, you're stuck there, that's also not good for you. So nowadays, that's actually what happens. A lot of us, okay, I'm like this. And then you just have a fixed mindset, right? You don't challenge yourself, so that makes you not resilient. Or you challenge yourself till the point of burnout.
Okay.
So find a balance between that, knowing yourself and completely learning about yourself while always challenging yourself. And for someone who just experienced a divorce, I would say that challenging yourself could be as simple as, I think I want to go to the gym today for 15 minutes.
Right.
Oh, I think it's been a long time since I haven't worn something nice. Maybe today I wear something nice. Or, I haven't called my children for a few days. I think this is time for me to call them. It's something as simple as that, but it's something challenging, and you know that it's still in your limits. It's still safe for you, but it's stretching yourself out a bit. That's the best way to kind of create a resilience.
Not too much,
Not
but
too
just
much.
little,
You just have to-
Little by little by little, like 1% every day. You know how they say that?
Yeah.
Compound.
Wow. And then it goes to completely new you.
New you.
In no time.
In no time. All right, guys, we are still going to chit-chat with Mutiara Maharini, and we're going to take a quick break right now, because when we come back, we're going to talk about handling co-parenting.
Ooh.
Stay here on the 3-Hour News Show. See you today.